say Donald Trump is a revolutionary force that won't go away. What is your perspective on that?
Whether he's a revolutionary force? Well, when you say someone is a revolutionary force, then I think that you're implying that there's some positivistic view expressed. You could say perhaps he was revolutionary in the sense that he is giving voice to certain points of view which have been suppressed, by and large, by the Republican Party, which is to say the undereducated, largely white, middle to lower middle class, mostly men, and that's not a demographic that's been often a voice in the party and in the polity. But by and large, a revolutionary, no. He's just, he's in fact the other thing. He is recidivist. He is retrograde. He is backward thinking. He's anything but revolutionary.
In Europe, he comes across as a cartoon-like figure. How do you as Americans see him? As
a cartoon-like figure. Only a very dangerous one. A cartoon-like figure that's holding a gun to our heads, basically. But cartoonish, well, if you just created a billboard of all of the moods of Donald Trump, all of the grotesque configurations, Mussolini-like configurations that his face takes, then you see that he's really just a caricature. A caricature of what? I'm not exactly sure. I guess I would say a caricature of a demagogue, a caricature of a fat cat businessman, a caricature of a know-nothing. He talks about how smart he is, but if you ever actually listen to his conversations, I just read a transcript of an interview he did with the Washington Post editorial board, and it was barely intelligible. I actually have a sort of a private theory, which is that Donald Trump has learning disabilities, that he may have attention deficit, but because he's rich and because he controls such a vast financial and real estate empire, there's no one around to help him, poor man.
Are you surprised, despite all these things, about his appeal, about his success in the primaries?
No, because I think I'm not surprised. I think because his success in the primaries owes mostly to the drab, pale, unadventurous, uninteresting character of all of the people whom he has been competing with. And also, I mean, he is candid. If there's something to be said for a candor that's full of vitriol and a candor that's full of race divisiveness, there is a certain candor about him, so that doesn't surprise me, no. But again, it's mostly a matter of whom one compares him to superficially. Americans who talk, we have politics running nonstop in America all the time. Americans really aren't, very interested in politics. It's just a TV show to most of us. And second, we're really not interested in government, because government, and my wife, I know this because my wife has been in government most of her life, government's not very interesting. It just happens to be crucial. So you've got to be willing to get down, as they say, in the weeds of issues, and most Americans don't want to get into the weeds of issues. They want to talk in slogans. They want to talk in bumper stickers. They want to talk in monosyllables. So, but for them, Trump is a godsend.
You could say that Trump expresses what maybe a majority thinks but is afraid to say.
You could say that, but I don't think you'd be right. I think you could say that Trump expresses what some people think but don't say. He also expresses what a lot of white, male, I don't want to say undereducated, but certainly white, male, underperforming economically citizens think, because they feel that things are changing in the United States demographically, things are changing in the United States financially, and they are feeling left behind, and they're angry about it.
What kind of character could Trump play in a novel that you write? What would you reveal about him at the end of your book?
He wouldn't interest me enough to write about him. He isn't an interesting man.
Did the political culture of this country change through Donald Trump?
Well, that remains to be seen, which is why we're having an election. What does worry me about Trump and of the people who will be disenfranchised and who will feel that they have been overlooked when he's not elected is that they worry me because they're going to be a lot angrier than they are now when he doesn't win. And I don't know what that will occasion in this country. It, to me, is a big question mark, and it's important.
What made it possible that a figure like Trump could come to such prominence in politics?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, probably 25 things, but I can just name a couple. One is that he's self-financed. He doesn't have to owe anybody anything, and so that allows him to be completely without obligation. Another thing is, in amidst, far beyond skepticism, but in immense cynicism about government in this country. You know, when for the entirety of President Obama's presidency, the Congress basically hasn't worked in concert with the executive in this country. People, and you don't think that they would in such a big, diverse country as this, people are sick of that. Even if the Congress does what they don't like, when the Congress just does nothing and does nothing and does nothing, people get very, very angry about that. And finally, I think he just, as a sort of braggart and rich guy, he just appeals to a certain kind of American who wishes he or she were rich as well. And if they were rich, would be just as brash and just as ignoble as Trump is.
We already touched about the people that feel left behind, the marginalized people. What are they yearning for?
Well, what they are yearning for is a piece of the pie. What they're yearning for is what Ronald Reagan perfidiously promised them in the 80s, which was that if they would vote Republican, if they would support the rich getting richer, that largesse, that rich, would trickle down to them, except it ain't happened. And that's one of the things that they're mad about, and that's one of the things that they're longing for. They're longing to be richer, is what they're longing for. And I don't blame them.
You know, his slogan is to make America great again. What kind of America are they looking for?
Oh, a sentimentalized America that actually doesn't bear close examination. I mean, maybe the America that emerged from World War II, in which people came home from the European theater and from Asia and got jobs and bought houses and had cars and raised families and did better than their previous generation did. That's probably what the model would be.
Trump calls himself a unifier. Right now, I think he's more kind of dividing the country. But could he, as a president, actually unify?
You know, the truth is that if he were to be president, his role and the performance of his job would be totally unpredictable. We would not be able to predict how he would function as president any more than we can predict what he's going to say when he gets up on a stage today. So that I think that if he were to be president, and I hope to Christ that he won't be, he might feel the need to be more of a unifier than he has so far made himself seem to be. So, hoping, springing eternal, I would hope that if he, by some ill fate, became president of the United States, that he would be somehow imbued with a sense of responsibility and would be a better president than I would think. But I don't think so. What I actually think is that what would happen to him as a world leader would that he would be intimidated by everybody.
He would be intimidated by everybody?
Everybody.
And he would not be intimidating other people?
They'd be laughing at him. Because, you know, all of these things that he says he's going to do, you know, he's going to build a wall between here and Mexico. He's going to eradicate ISIS in the Middle East. He's going to change our whole relationship with China. Our Constitution, our brand of government, which has a legislative and executive and a judicial branch, doesn't permit that.
Do you think he really means what he says? Or is he just saying it because he thinks that's what gets him elected?
I think he runs his world, and it's a rather small world that he runs, although he thinks it's vast, but it's small. There's no difference between what he says and what happens, because he's the boss. So what he says is what happens, and so therefore what he says is what he means. So in his world, in the tiny world that he runs and inhabits, there's no discrepancy. And so he doesn't know the difference. But I think the difference is between what he says and what he can do, what he says and what he means, would become dramatically distinct if he were ever the President of the United States, God forbid.
Will Donald Trump, even if he's not elected, have kind of demolished the American political party system?
He's certainly done some damage to the Republican Party. That I know, and more power to him as far as I'm concerned. But to have done irreparable harm to the American political party system in general, I don't think he's done any more to that system than the system has done to itself. I mean, when you get to be President of the United States, it's remarkable how limited is the sphere of what you can do, both because of the American system of checks and balances, but because of the fact that you only have 4 years to do it in. And you have all these other countries all around that have their own agendas and that don't want to let you do the things that you want to do. So the influence that you can exert has to be carefully chosen and assiduously practiced in order to get anything done at all.
Would there be some personal consequence for you if Trump actually becomes president?
Well, some personal consequence for me. I would think that the country that I live in is not the country that I thought I lived in, frankly. I would think that something was materially and vitally altered in my sense of my fellow Americans' sense of stewardship, my fellow Americans' sense of being a member of a world community, my fellow Americans' sense of empathy. So yes, there would be spiritual changes in my life if Trump were to be elected.
What would he do to the atmosphere in this country before he elected president?
I wouldn't be surprised if Trump became president of the United States, God forbid. I'm not going to say those words without saying God forbid. I wouldn't be surprised if his view of his role didn't change, if his view of what his responsibilities were didn't become more sympathetic to the Americans in general. I can't count on that, obviously, because he says many things which would lead you to believe the opposite. But I just know that the day you stand there on that podium in front of the Capitol building and you look out at that vast sea of people who are suddenly depending on you to lead them and keep them safe and keep the world safe, I'm not above believing that it would change him.